welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, a really difficult subject. Interpersonal violence. It's huge, it's sensitive,
It really is.
but our mission today is pretty clear. We want to synthesize the core academic thinking on why violence happens.
Exactly. We're going to look at the source material, starting really small, individual biology,
Right.
and then expand out to the big picture, like cultural systems. We'll map out the theories, define things like murder and assault, basically try to figure out if violence is baked in biologically or if it's something we learn.
So by the end, you, the listener, should have a solid framework for this.
That's the plan.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting with the individual. Why does a person become violent? Academics often look inside first, right? Biology, psychology.
Yeah, and some initial findings are, well, they're quite compelling, suggesting potential physical causes.
Like what specifically?
Well, the research talks about claims that violence might stem from things like neurological impairment, maybe low intelligence, or even psychotic symptoms. And neuroscientists specifically, they've pointed to actual structural differences in the brain,
Differences where?
particularly in the limbic system that handles emotion and the prefrontal cortex.
Which is about control, right?
Yeah.
Impulse control, judgment.
Exactly. So the idea is maybe aggressive individuals have, less effective brakes, biologically speaking.
Okay, that immediately throws us into the deep end, doesn't it? This question of instinct. Is aggression just part of being human?
And the materials give us three really different viewpoints on that, almost contradictory.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Well, first you've got the classic Freudian view. He argued we have these two fundamental drives, eros, the life instinct,
Mm-hmm.
and thanatos, the death instinct,
Uh-huh.
which he saw as this powerful, sort of destructive force within us.
Okay, so an internal conflict. Then what?
Then there's Lorenz, the ethologist. He took it a step further, really. He argued that aggressive energy is produced by inbred instincts.
Meaning it happens no matter the environment.
That was his argument, yeah.
Um,
Independent of the environment.
But wait, you said contradictory views. How does Collins fit in? Because his idea sounds like the complete opposite.
It absolutely is. Collins argues humans are, get this, inherently passive.
Passive. So violence isn't instinctual at all.
Not according to Collins. He believes violence is primarily a function of social interaction. It's learned, it's situational.
So the environment isn't just a trigger, it's the actual source.
That's the core of his argument. And that shift, from instinct to environment, it forces us to look really closely at things like upbringing and social factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And one huge factor that comes up is substance abuse.
A major one. The sources detail three distinct ways substances connect to violence. It's not just about being drunk or high.
Right, what are they?
Okay, first, there's the direct psychopharmacological relationship. That's the straightforward effect, Drugs, lower inhibitions, alter brain chemistry.
Makes sense.
Second is economic compulsive behavior. This is where someone commits violence, maybe robbery,
Right.
specifically to get money for drugs.
So the violence serves the addiction.
Exactly. And third, there's the systemic link. This refers to the violence that's just inherent in the drug trade itself.
Like turf wars, enforcing debts, that kind of thing.
Precisely. Beyond substances, though, childhood socialization is just massive.
Yeah, the academic breakdown is pretty specific. Absent or deviant parents, discipline that's all over the place, lack of supervision.
And, tragically, physical abuse and harsh physical punishment. The sources are clear. Kids who go through that are at a much higher risk for criminality later on.
It feels like there's a pathway there, from being a victim to becoming an offender.
And there's a theory for that, the violentization process. It's a model that basically says violence is learned in stages. It's not like flipping a switch.
Okay, walk us through those stages. What's the progression?
It starts with the brutalization stage. This is where the child either experiences violence themselves or witnesses it constantly.
Okay, that's the foundation.
Then comes the belligerency stage. And this is really key. The individual starts to think, okay, violence works, it's necessary. They decide they might need to use it.
So it becomes a tool in their mind.
Right. Then they test it out in the violent performance stage. They actually try using violence.
And if that works for them.
If it's successful, in their view, they can reach the virulency stage. Here, they fully commit psychologically to being a violent person. It becomes part of their identity.
Wow. So it shows how violence can be adopted, almost like a role, often starting from that early trauma.
Definitely. And the risk isn't just about internalizing trauma. It's also about just seeing it, simple exposure.
The statistics you mentioned earlier were pretty startling.
They really are. Something like 30 to 40% of children who are exposed to violence end up showing significant violent behavior themselves.
That's incredibly high.
And this one detail just, it really stops you. Exposure to gun violence actually doubles the chance a young person will later engage in violent behavior.
Doubles it.
Yeah, that's a clear, measurable impact of the environment. It really underscores how surroundings can shape behavior, potentially overriding other factors.
So if we zoom out from the individual and their immediate environment, we get into these broader cultural factors.
Right. Criminologists talk about the subculture of violence.
Explain that. What does it mean?
The idea is that in certain communities, often, poor, disorganized neighborhoods, violence becomes almost embedded. It's a product of the local beliefs, values, behaviors.
So it's normalized.
In a way, yes. It encourages what they call disputatiousness.
Disputatiousness.
Yeah, like a readiness to argue aggressively, to fight over perceived insults or slights. And it often links to involvement in the gang subculture, where violence is a key way to gain status and respect.
And this isn't just neighborhood level, right? The analysis goes bigger picture, even to national traits.
It does. When looking at the U.S., for instance, some explanations for its relatively high violence rates point back to a kind of frontier culture.
Frontier culture, what does that entail?
Well, characteristics like historical racism, a really intense focus on personal honor, maybe a willingness to use violence for retaliation. The theory suggests these traits, along with things like glorified machismo or even political corruption, can predict higher rates of violence on a national scale. It frames some violence as deeply rooted, historically and systemically, not just as individual acts.
It's incredibly complex. We've got biology, psychology, upbringing, exposure, culture, all tangled together.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've explored the why. Now let's apply that. Let's look at how these causes manifest in specific types of violent crime, starting with arguably the most severe, murder and homicide.
Right. Legally, the key is often about intent. The sources break down homicide into degrees. First-degree murder usually requires premeditation.
Meaning you planned it out beforehand.
Exactly. Or it happens during another serious crime, like a robbery. That's often called felony murder.
Okay, so first degree is calculated. How is second-degree murder different?
Second degree still involves intent to kill, what lawyers call deliberation, but maybe without that extended planning. It could be more spontaneous, like intending to kill in the heat of the moment.
Still intentional, but less premeditated.
Right. And below that, you have manslaughter. This is unlawful killing, but without malice of forethought. Think voluntary manslaughter, like a crime of passion, or non-negligent manslaughter.
Got it. And there's a specific legal point mentioned, the born and alive rule.
Yeah, traditionally, for it to be homicide, the victim had to be born and take a breath. But that's become more complex now with feticide laws.
Laws that criminalize causing the death of a fetus.
Exactly. It shows how legal definitions evolve around who counts as a victim. Now, looking at the actual data on murder.
What does it tell us?
Well, rates have generally been declining, which is good news, but it's still very much an urban crime, concentrated in cities.
Yeah, the demographics, anything stand out?
Oh, definitely. They are starkly specific. Overwhelmingly, those arrested are male, about 90%.
Wow.
And a deeply concerning statistic, about half of all murder victims are young African-American men.
Half. That's staggering.
It is. And another key point from the sources, murder tends to be intraracial.
Meaning victim and offender are usually the same race.
Correct. Which often runs counter to, sensationalized media portrayals. It grounds the crime in specific community dynamics.
Okay. Now, what about situations where there are multiple victims? The sources distinguish between different types of multiple murderers.
Yes. 3 main types. First, the serial murderer.
Definition.
Killing 3 or more people in 3 or more separate events, and there's a crucial cooling-off period between the killings.
Right, and they have subtypes.
Yeah, often categorized by motive or style wanderers, sadists, psychopaths. And interestingly, about 10 to 15% of known serial killers are female. Okay, second type, mass murder. This is killing 4 or more victims, but crucially, it's in a single event at one location.
Like a shooting in one place.
Exactly. And criminologists often classify these based on motive. Revenge killers, love killers, often distorted notions of love, like killing family to save them, profit killers, and terrorist killers.
And the third type?
The spree killer. They also kill multiple victims, but unlike serial killers, there's no real cooling off period. The killing is more continuous, even if it happens in different locations over a short period.
Right, a burst of violence rather than separate incidents over time.
Precisely.
Okay, let's shift now to another major category, rape. The origins of the word itself are revealing.
Yes, it comes from the Latin rapere, meaning to take by force. And historically, you see things like heiress stealing.
Heiress stealing.
Yeah, in medieval times, basically abducting and raping wealthy women to force marriage and gain control of their inheritance. A very literal taking by
It's
force.
horrifying. What about incidents today? It's notoriously underreported, isn't it?
Hugely underreported. Official stats, like the UCR data, might show around 84,000 reported rapes or attempts annually. But research cited in our sources suggests the reality is much higher. Perhaps up to 10% of adult women have been raped in their lifetime.
That's a massive gap between reported and estimated actual cases.
It really highlights the difficulty in measurement, and the types of rape listed show how varied it is.
Like gang rape, serial rape, acquaintance rape. Date rape is a big one.
Yes. Also marital rape, statutory rape, and one that might surprise people is rape by deception.
Deception. How does that work legally?
It's complex, but it involves situations where consent is technically given, but it's based on fraud. Like, the victim believes the act is a necessary medical procedure, or maybe thinks the perpetrator is someone else, like their spouse.
Tricky legal ground. And the causes proposed are just as varied, aren't they?
They really are. Everything from evolutionary or biological factors to male socialization patterns, psychological issues, social learning, even a gender conflict perspective, seeing rape as about power, not just sex, and of course, sexual motivation itself.
And the legal side is challenging too, proving it. Issues of consent.
Absolutely. Though there have been developments like shield laws to protect victims' privacy in court and victim restoration efforts.
Okay. Moving on to another category of physical violence, assault and battery. What's the basic distinction there?
It's important. Battery is the actual harmful or offensive touching. Assault, technically, doesn't require any touching. It's the act of intentionally causing fear of immediate battery.
So, threatening counts as assault.
Threatening by word or deed, yes, if it causes reasonable fear.
And how common is assault?
It's incredibly common. The FBI records something like 800,000 aggravated assaults each year. That's a rate of about 275 per 100,000 people. It often gets less attention than homicide, but the volume is huge.
Who is typically involved?
Offenders are usually young, overwhelmingly male, about 80%, and often white, actually. Rates are highest in cities during the summer and geographically in the South and West, according to the data.
And a significant amount of this happens within families, right? Domestic violence.
Yes, a huge and tragic area. Child abuse, for instance, is broadly defined as physical or emotional trauma where there's no reasonable explanation for the injury.
And the causes often loop back to things we discussed earlier.
They do. Generational cycles of violence are a major factor. Stressors like blended families, isolation, lack of support networks.
It's not just physical abuse of children either.
No, the sources also cover sexual abuse, even parental abuse, where children actually victimize their parents, which does happen, and of course, spousal abuse, which sadly has a very long history.
And dating violence too.
Right, including what's termed relational aggression. This isn't physical, but it's about using relationships to harm someone, manipulation, spreading rumors, social exclusion, still a form of violence.
Okay, now let's look at what the sources call emerging forms of violence, though some feel quite established now, starting with hate crimes.
Yeah, the key here isn't what the crime is, but why it was committed.
So the motivation is everything.
Exactly. It's a criminal act targeting someone solely because of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, disability, their group identity.
And what drives people to commit these acts? The sources identify motivations.
Yes, three main types. First is thrill-seeking. Often young offenders doing it for excitement, a dare, showing off, no deep ideology necessarily.
Okay.
Second is reactive. This is more defensive in the offender's mind. They feel their group or way of life is threatened, so they lash out at the perceived source of the threat.
A defensive reaction.
And third is mission motivation. This is the most dangerous, usually. The offender believes they have a higher calling, a duty to eliminate the targeted group, often linked to extremist ideologies.
How common are reported hate crimes?
The FBI tracks around 7,000 incidents reported annually. It's likely underreported, like rape. But of those reported, racial bigotry was the motivation for more than half.
Over half based on race. And what form do these crimes usually take?
Interestingly, the most common form reported is intimidation, threats, harassment, showing that the psychological impact, creating fear, is often the main weapon.
Okay. Next up, workplace violence. We hear about this, and the cost mentioned is enormous.
Yeah, over $4 billion annually. That includes things like lost work time, legal costs, security measures,
What are the typical routes identified?
several things. Perceived injustice from management, maybe layoffs or unfair treatment. Sexual harassment is a factor. Jealousy between coworkers. Or sometimes just a response to workplace provocation.
It's not just disgruntled employees acting out, though.
No, criminologists actually categorize it. Type 1 is violence by a stranger during another crime, like a robbery at a store. Type 2 is by a customer or client. But Type 3 is worker-on-worker violence, and Type 4 involves personal relationships spilling into the workplace.
Got it. Okay, finally, let's touch on stalking. How do the sources define that? It seems broader than just following someone.
It is broader. It's defined as a course of conduct. Repeated actions directed at a specific person.
Like what kind of actions?
Repeated physical following or just showing up where they are, visual proximity. Non-consensual communication calls, texts, emails, or verbal, written, or implied threats that cause fear. The key is repetition and causing fear in a reasonable person.
And it's often linked to other behaviors, isn't it?
Very clearly. The sources note a strong relationship between stalking and other emotionally controlling and physically abusive behavior. It's rarely an isolated act. It's usually part of a larger pattern of coercive control, often in relationships that have ended.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. From brain structures to cultural norms, from murder stats to stalking definitions.
We really have. And I think the big takeaway is wrestling with these dualities, right? The constant tension between instinct versus social interaction.
Yeah, or the micro versus the macro, like specific biological factors, the prefrontal cortex function versus these huge cultural influences, like that idea of the American frontier culture.
Exactly.
So for you listening, understanding violence really means holding these competing ideas together. It's almost never just one single cause.
No, the data just doesn't support that. It forces you to see how personal histories, trauma, social learning, and cultural context are all deeply interwoven. They drive everything from, calculated first-degree murder down to subtle relational aggression.
Which leads us to a final thought, something for you to consider.
Given everything we've discussed, especially that clear, quantifiable link between early trauma abuse or that shocking statistic about exposure to gun violence doubling risk and later criminality, where do you think the most effective starting point for prevention lies? Is it focusing on the individual factors, the biology, the psychology, or is tackling the broader societal and cultural factors, the environment, the exposure, the norms? Which approach offers the best leverage?
Something to think about. That's all the time we have for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.